I introduced around Jackie Brown a new crew member to the set, and his name is Big Jerry.
For decades, Quentin Tarantino has stood by every film he's made, except one. It's not because it flopped, or because critics tore it apart. In fact, this 1997 movie was widely praised, featuring one of the strongest female performances of his career. But behind the scenes, something happened that changed the way Tarantino saw filmmaking forever. It wasn't about the movie itself, it was about her, the woman at the center of it all. Years later, he admitted that what happened during and after that film left a mark he could never erase, a decision he can't take back, and a partnership that never recovered. Quentin Tarantino regrets making this 1997 movie because of her. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, Uma Thurman wasn't just another actress working with Quentin Tarantino. She was his muse, his star, the face of his most iconic creations. Together, they reshaped modern cinema with the 1994 classic Pulp Fiction, a film that instantly turned both of them into Hollywood royalty. Almost a decade later, they reunited for Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2, a bloody operatic revenge saga where Thurman played the unforgettable bride, a woman on a ruthless mission for justice against those who betrayed her. Behind the camera, their relationship was close, deeply collaborative, sometimes even romantic, but it was also intense. That intensity came to a breaking point near the very end of the Kill Bill shoot. After nearly 9 months of filming, just 4 days before wrapping, Tarantino prepared to shoot a key moment in the bride's story. He wanted Uma to drive a vintage blue Carmen Ghia down a sandy back road at around 40 miles per hour. Thurman, however, didn't feel safe. She had already been warned by a crew member that the car wasn't in good condition, and every instinct told her it wasn't worth the risk. But Tarantino, ever the perfectionist chasing that raw realism he's known for, insisted she do the drive herself. Reluctantly, she agreed. What happened next was horrifying. Uma lost control of the car, which veered off the road and slammed headfirst into a palm tree. The crash was brutal. Her knees were crushed against the dashboard, and the steering wheel pinned her body in place. She described the moment as one of sheer terror, convinced she might never walk again. Crew members, including Tarantino, rushed to pull her from the wreck, but the damage had already been done. She was left with lasting injuries to her neck, back, and knees. When she returned to the set days later, still bruised and wearing a neck brace, she saw the wrecked car and was overwhelmed with anger. That's when everything between her and Tarantino fractured. She later recalled an explosive argument where she accused him of trying to kill her, a statement that enraged him, even though he insisted that wasn't his intention. The tension didn't fade easily. They had to continue working together through the film's promotion, but their relationship had grown cold and uneasy. Years later, in 2004, the two had another major confrontation at New York's Soho House. Thurman was furious that Tarantino wouldn't let her see the crash footage, which he said was a decision made collectively. In reality, Miramax refused to release the video unless she signed a document freeing the studio from any legal responsibility for her injuries. Thurman later reflected on that period, distinguishing the physical harm from the emotional betrayal. She spoke candidly about feeling deceived, calling the car crash a cheap shot after everything she had endured in that working relationship. The footage, she said, had been hidden to protect those responsible, not her. In her own words, she believed that what followed, the lies, the destruction of evidence, and the years of silence, showed deliberate malice. To her, it wasn't just an accident anymore. It was a cover-up, and it left a permanent scar on what had once been one of Hollywood's most celebrated creative partnerships. Now, Quentin Tarantino recalls that day as one of the toughest of his career. Before filming, Uma Thurman was clearly uneasy about driving the car for the scene. Tarantino says he reassured her it was completely safe, and she agreed to do it, because, in her own words, she trusted him. Years later, Tarantino admitted that trust is what still weighs on him. In a candid conversation with Deadline, he opened up about what happened and didn't shy away from taking the blame. He explained that no one on set saw the drive as a stunt, though in hindsight it clearly should have been treated like one. To prove it was safe, Tarantino even drove the road himself beforehand, coming back confident and telling Uma it was a straight, easy path. but he later realized how wrong he was. He confessed that there was one major mistake he made that day. The crew had decided at the last minute to have Thurman drive in the opposite direction because of the lighting. Tarantino admitted he never retested the new route after that change, assuming it would be the same. It wasn't. He explained that going in the opposite direction revealed a small S-curve in what otherwise looked like a straight stretch of road. When Uma hit that section, she wasn't prepared and the car spun out of control. Tarantino described it as one of the most heartbreaking moments of his life, an error he still calls one of his greatest regrets, both professionally and personally. When Uma Thurman spoke about the crash years later in her New York Times interview, Tarantino said he already knew the piece was coming. The two had discussed it beforehand, trying to figure out how she would tell her story. According to Tarantino, Uma wanted to truly understand what had happened that day, even after so many years. She asked him if he could find the footage of the crash, and he went digging through old storage boxes until he found it. He described finally locating that 15-year-old tape as a moment of relief. He wanted her to see it, to get some closure, especially since Harvey Weinstein, who had been a producer on the film, had allegedly kept the footage from her. Tarantino said he wanted to help her heal and perhaps even allow an expert to study the video to understand exactly what went wrong. Still, he wasn't happy with how the Times story portrayed him. He claimed he was supposed to speak with the writer, Maureen Dowd, but the meeting never happened. When the article came out, he felt like he was left standing alone while others involved stayed silent or hid behind lawyers. In that same Deadline interview, Tarantino also addressed other controversies that resurfaced from his films, like the moments where he personally performed certain intense actions on his actresses. He explained that during a particular scene in Kill Bill, he chose to spit on Uma Thurman himself, rather than have actor Michael Madsen do it. His reasoning was practical, he said. He knew exactly where he wanted it to land and wanted to minimize the number of takes. To him, it was about taking responsibility for what the scene required rather than asking someone else to do it. Tarantino also revealed that the infamous choking scene in Kill Bill was actually Uma's idea. He had planned to fake it using a prop setup, but she suggested he wrap the chain loosely around her neck for real, just enough to get the natural reaction on camera. He stressed that it was brief, safe, and entirely with her consent. A similar situation arose years later on the set of Inglourious Basterds. For one particularly intense scene, Tarantino personally asked actress Diane Kruger if he could choke her himself for a close-up shot, promising it would be brief and closely monitored. She agreed, trusting his direction. Later, Kruger went on social media to make her stance clear. Working with Tarantino had been a positive experience. She said he treated her with total respect and never forced her to do anything she didn't feel comfortable with. You see, Tarantino has always been known as a filmmaker obsessed with the details. Every frame, every sound, every splash of blood has to be just right. Take Kill Bill, for instance. When he began that project, he made a bold decision. No digital effects. He wanted everything to feel real, from the stunts to the sword fights, even down to the blood itself. He once explained that he didn't want generic horror movie blood. He wanted what he called samurai blood, the kind of vivid, stylized red you'd see in classic Japanese films. To him, it wasn't about shock value. It was about authenticity. That same perfectionism extended into how he worked with his actors. Despite his reputation for control, Tarantino showed a surprising flexibility when collaborating with people he trusted. Uma Thurman, who became his creative partner and muse during Kill Bill, said what made him so different was his willingness to adapt. Most directors cling tightly to their scripts, but Tarantino could change direction in an instant if inspiration struck on set. Still, Thurman understood that bringing his over-the-top vision to life required grounding it in something real. She explained that her job was to make the bride, a character born from Tarantino's wild imagination, feel human, not cartoonish. That balance between his theatrical style and her emotional realism became the heart of Kill Bill. Then there's Pam Grier, another icon who played a major role in Tarantino's world. Before Jackie Brown, she was already a legend from the 1970s blaxploitation era with films like Foxy Brown and Coffee. When Tarantino cast her in 1997, it was more than nostalgia. It was him honoring a promise he made years earlier when she auditioned for Pulp Fiction. She didn't get that part, but Tarantino told her they'd work together one day, and he kept his word. Greer later said that he was a man of his honor and that working with him was pure joy. To her, Tarantino poured every ounce of his energy into his craft. His vision, his breath, his sweat. But even with all that artistic devotion, there's a clear pattern across his work. His female characters rarely escape suffering. Uma Thurman's experience on Kill Bill proves that in more ways than one. Just 3 months after giving birth to her son, she was expected to start training for the film. It wasn't light work either. Multiple styles of kung fu, 2 sword-fighting techniques, knife throwing, and even learning Japanese. The physical demands were so intense that she once hit herself in the head with a samurai sword during practice. Tarantino acknowledged how tough it was for her. He joked that her training routine before this movie had basically been cutting down on cigarettes. She started 30 pounds heavier from her pregnancy, feeling overwhelmed, but Tarantino wouldn't compromise on authenticity. He refused to use quick edits or CGI. If the bride fought, Uma Thurman had to fight. After months of brutal training and filming, Thurman later said she was proud of the result, but even more relieved it was over. By the time Kill Bill Vol. 2 came out, she had a long list of on-set injuries to show for it. When asked about it, she laughed but admitted she didn't want any more pain. She explained that working with Tarantino was such a unique experience that no other director could ever replicate it. Still, she took the skills she learned with her, describing the training as something that stayed in her body, like learning a dance. She said she'd love to play another strong woman one day, just maybe not one who gets beaten up so much. That recurring theme of strong women who endure immense suffering before triumphing runs through nearly all of Tarantino's films. From Beatrix Kiddo's Revenge Quest to Pam Grier's street-smart survivor in Jackie Brown, or Kerry Washington's enslaved heroine in Django Unchained, victory in his movies always comes at a cost. Even in Planet Terror, where Rose McGowan's character literally loses a leg, survival is both brutal and cathartic. Critics often point out that Tarantino's films serve as his own form of wish fulfillment. They're cinematic worlds where he gets to rewrite history and deliver justice on his terms. In Inglourious Basterds, Jewish soldiers slaughter Nazis. In Django Unchained, enslaved people get their revenge on white slave owners. His stories flip the balance of power in ways reality often can't. But this same philosophy has sparked heated debate. If his films represent his ideal moral universe, some argue that his on-set behavior, like personally spitting on or choking actresses for realism, casts a darker shadow on that vision. Journalist Larissa McFarquhar once observed that Tarantino doesn't separate who an actor is from the roles they've played. He sees their careers and their personal histories as one continuous thread that adds emotional weight to his characters. That's what makes his performances feel so layered. He's using both their art and their life to tell the story. It's an approach that's as fascinating as it is unsettling. It makes you wonder where an artist's imagination ends and their personal morals begin. And in Tarantino's world, where those lines often blur, it's hard to tell where the art stops and the man starts. Things got even messier for him when another controversy hit, right on the heels of the backlash he was already facing. On the very same day he was dealing with criticism over Uma Thurman's accident, an old audio clip from a Howard Stern interview began making the rounds. In that recording, Tarantino could be heard defending director Roman Polanski's 1977 assault of a 13-year-old girl. In the clip, he argued that what happened wasn't rape, describing it instead as statutory, and suggesting that the victim had been a willing participant. His words were widely condemned. The victim, Samantha Geimer, later responded publicly, making it clear that Tarantino was completely wrong. She said she didn't need anyone debating what had happened to her. She knew the truth because she had lived it. Still, Geimer chose to forgive Tarantino, saying she appreciated his support for Uma Thurman and other women who had experienced assault. Realizing how hurtful his comments had been, Tarantino eventually apologized. He admitted that he had tried to play devil's advocate during the radio interview, and that doing so was both ignorant and insensitive. He acknowledged that Geimer had indeed been raped by Polanski and expressed deep regret for minimizing her trauma. Then came another reckoning, this time much closer to home. When the wave of allegations against producer Harvey Weinstein exploded, Tarantino found himself forced to confront his own role in that story. In a candid interview with the New York Times, he admitted that he had known more than he should have ignored. These weren't vague rumors, he said. He knew specific details about Weinstein's behavior and had even been aware of a settlement with actress Rose McGowan. The situation was personal for Tarantino. In the mid-1990s, he had dated actress Mira Sorvino, who told him directly about Weinstein's harassment toward her. Tarantino said he was disgusted by what he heard and even confronted Weinstein, telling him to stop. But looking back, he realized he hadn't done nearly enough. Instead of taking stronger action, he rationalized it away, telling himself it was just a case of inappropriate infatuation. He later described that response as one of his biggest moral failures, admitting he had marginalized the incidents in his mind. Tarantino reflected on how that kind of thinking had been part of a larger problem in Hollywood, a culture where powerful men acted without consequence and everyone else looked the other way. He called it a system built on male tolerance, one that had been allowed to thrive because, as he put it, that was simply the way it was. What truly opened his eyes, though, was hearing from Uma Thurman herself. When she told him about her own alleged assault by Weinstein, everything clicked. Her story mirrored what he'd already heard from Mira Sorvino years before. That was the moment Tarantino said he finally recognized the disturbing pattern in Weinstein's behavior, the same manipulative tactics of luring, cornering, and coercion. It was then he understood just how deep and destructive that abuse of power really was. Now, Thurman later gave an incredibly brave and painful account of her experience with Harvey Weinstein, describing an incident that took place in a hotel room not long after the success of Pulp Fiction. She said the encounter completely blindsided her, explaining how Weinstein tried to force himself on her and expose himself. Though she managed to escape before he could go further, the shock and violation stayed with her. The next day, she received a chilling gesture from him, a bouquet of yellow roses with a note that read, "You have great instincts." When she later confronted him face to face, she warned that if he ever treated other women the way he had treated her, he would lose his career, reputation, and family. Over time, pictures of Thurman smiling beside Weinstein surfaced, which his team tried to use to discredit her story. But as she pointed out, there are countless photos of people smiling next to Weinstein before the truth about him became public. At the Cannes Film Festival in 2001, Quentin Tarantino reportedly noticed Thurman looking uneasy around Weinstein. She reminded him of what had happened at the Savoy Hotel, but she believed he dismissed it at the time as just another instance of Weinstein chasing after women. Thurman later expressed deep guilt, feeling she might have unintentionally encouraged other women to trust Weinstein by continuing to work with him. She said that by starring in Kill Bill, a film celebrated for female empowerment, she made it seem safe to collaborate with someone who, in reality, preyed on women. She reflected that many women probably assumed someone in Weinstein's position couldn't possibly do something illegal to them, but he did. When Weinstein's team responded to her claims, they admitted he had made what they called an awkward pass after misreading her signals, but flatly denied any physical assault. They said this was the first time they had heard such specific allegations and expressed confusion over why Thurman had waited 25 years to speak out, emphasizing their long and successful working relationship. According to Thurman, she eventually told Tarantino about the incident, and that conversation completely changed his understanding of Weinstein. Tarantino confronted Weinstein, who offered what Thurman described as a half-hearted apology. But Tarantino later made it clear he never believed Weinstein's excuses. He told him directly that he stood with Thurman, and that if Weinstein wanted to be involved with Kill Bill, he needed to make things right. Tarantino even claimed that his agreement to make Kill Bill with Miramax depended on Weinstein apologizing to Thurman. But despite his support, Thurman admitted a deep sense of betrayal lingered between them. They remained distant for several years until they finally reconciled during a dinner at Soho House in New York, where they openly discussed the car crash on the Kill Bill set and the resentment she still carried toward him. From that point on, they managed to rebuild their friendship. Thurman made it clear she doesn't see Tarantino as malicious, but rather as someone whose carelessness crossed into negligence. She described the accident as negligent to the point of criminality, but not done with intent to harm. Still, she acknowledged that Tarantino later did the right thing. He took a major personal risk by giving her the footage of the crash, despite knowing it could harm his reputation and relationships in Hollywood. For Thurman, that act meant everything. She said she respected him deeply for helping her bring the truth to light, calling it an act of courage that allowed her to finally expose what had really happened, even if justice would never come. Why Tarantino might quit at his peak. Quentin Tarantino has been shaping cinema for over 3 decades, and if there's one thing that defines his career, it's that he's never followed the traditional path. From the raw intensity of Reservoir Dogs to the groundbreaking storytelling of Pulp Fiction, his early films didn't just become hits, they completely shifted how a generation viewed filmmaking itself. But now it seems the legendary director has one final twist planned, stepping away while still at the top of his game. The topic came up during his appearance on Real Time with Bill Maher, where Tarantino was promoting the paperback version of his novel, a companion to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Maher, clearly a fan, praised both the book and the film, calling it Tarantino's peak work, and even his personal favorite from the director. That naturally led him to ask the big question, why stop now? Tarantino's answer caught everyone off guard. He explained that knowing he might already be at his creative peak is exactly why he wants to stop. In his words, film history shows that most directors don't get better from this point on. It was a statement that left Maher a little stunned, but Tarantino doubled down. He admitted he didn't have an argument that would convince everyone, but after 30 years of filmmaking, he feels he's given everything he has to offer creatively. To make his point, Tarantino mentioned other iconic directors like Don Siegel, known for Dirty Harry, suggesting that if they had chosen to end their careers at just the right moment, their legacies might have shined even brighter. Of course, fans have heard these retirement rumors before. Tarantino's been saying for years that he'll stop after his 10th film. For a while, everyone thought that movie would be The Movie Critic. Back in 2023, reports claimed production was already in motion. But time passed, and nothing came of it. By 2024, word got out that Tarantino had officially scrapped the idea and gone back to the drawing board. The original story focused on a film critic who wrote for an adult magazine in the 1970s, but it looks like that project's been shelved for good. This change matters because it's tied to something Tarantino has been saying for decades, his plan to make only 10 films before retiring. In a conversation with Chris Wallace on CNN, he explained his reasoning. After 30 years in the game, he wanted to wrap up the show while still at the top. He made it clear he'd rather bow out while audiences are still hungry for more than risk-making movies that feel out of touch. While many fans respect that decision, not everyone agrees that his work would lose its spark with time. One viral post pointed out that legends like Scorsese, Miyazaki, Mann, and Ridley Scott, directors all in their 80s, are still producing masterpieces. Still others argue that Tarantino's discipline to end on his own terms is part of what makes him stand out. As film pundit Matt Neglia put it, let Tarantino cook, but maybe just let him surprise us with something different this time. Now, sitting at 9 directed films, Tarantino's self-imposed 10 and done rule has sparked endless debate. Should Kill Bill Vol 1 and Vol 2 count as 2 separate entries? Tarantino insists they're one, since they were shot together as a single project. And remember, this tally only includes films he directed himself, not the many classics he wrote or produced, like True Romance or Natural Born Killers. Over his career, he's jumped between genres, westerns, thrillers, comedies, martial arts epics, and built a filmography that feels like a love letter to cinema itself. Yet despite all his success, there's one major milestone he's never reached: winning the Oscar for Best Director. That means his next movie could be his last shot at taking home that elusive trophy. The Movie Critic would have been fascinating. A semi-autobiographical story set in 1970s California, inspired by a real magazine writer Tarantino admired as a teenager. He once described the man as funny, rude, and cynical, someone who wrote like a grizzled veteran even though he died in his 30s. Rumors swirled that Brad Pitt was attached to the project, though Tarantino later clarified he hadn't cast anyone, and was searching for someone closer to 35. But perfectionism has always been his guiding force. When he feels something isn't right, he stops, no matter how far along he is. This isn't even the first time he's pulled the plug on a film. Back in the 2010s, The Hateful Eight was shelved after the script leaked, only for Tarantino to revive it later after a live reading drew rave reactions. The situation with the movie critic, however, seems purely creative. He wants his final film to truly feel like the perfect goodbye. Across 9 movies, Tarantino's influence has been massive. Entire books and documentaries have been made about his storytelling and style. His sets attract Hollywood royalty: Leonardo DiCaprio, Uma Thurman, Brad Pitt, Jamie Foxx, Samuel L. Jackson, and Margot Robbie among them. Yet he's also revived fading careers, giving actors like John Travolta, Pam Grier, and Robert Forster second acts that reminded everyone just how good they are. Even people who've never watched his films can recognize his fingerprints in pop culture. His scenes have been parodied and celebrated in The Simpsons, Shrek, Team America, and even Lady Gaga and Beyoncé's music video for Telephone. His soundtracks, filled with unexpected song choices, often turn into cultural phenomena themselves. At this stage in his career, one thing is certain: Tarantino isn't interested in playing it safe. If this truly will be his final film, he's determined to make it count. After all, for a director whose work has shaped modern filmmaking, going out with a bang isn't just expected, it's inevitable. The feud that split Black Hollywood. The feud between Quentin Tarantino and Spike Lee first sparked back in 1997, the same year Tarantino's film Jackie Brown hit theaters. Critics largely praised the movie, especially for Pam Grier's comeback performance as a flight attendant caught up in money smuggling. But Spike Lee had a serious issue with it. His main complaint was Tarantino's excessive use of a certain racial slur, the N-word, which appeared 38 times throughout the film. Lee didn't hold back his feelings. Speaking to Variety, he argued that while some people might talk like that, Tarantino seemed, in his words, infatuated with the term. He even questioned whether the director was trying to be an honorary black man, adding that not all African Americans saw the word as something cool or trendy. Lee's comments drew plenty of attention, and some pushback too. Samuel L. Jackson, who starred in the film as the slick gunrunner Ordell Robbie, came out swinging in Tarantino's defense. In an interview with Jet magazine, Jackson dismissed the criticism, saying it was bull to suggest only black artists could use the word. He called Jackie Brown a strong tribute to the blaxploitation era, and even threw a jab at Lee, saying Spike hadn't made a good film in a while. Tarantino himself wasn't one to stay quiet either. In a chat with Charlie Rose, he defended his creative freedom, insisting that as a writer, he had every right to create any kind of character he wanted. To him, being told he couldn't write certain roles because he was white was, in his words, racist. This clash didn't stop there. Years later, when Tarantino released Django Unchained, the tension reignited. The film's heavy use of racial slurs and its violent portrayal of slavery stirred another round of controversy. Before its release, Lee made it clear he wasn't going to watch it. In an interview with Vibe TV, he said the movie was disrespectful to his ancestors. He later took to Twitter comparing American slavery not to a spaghetti western, but to a Holocaust, declaring that he would honor his ancestors by refusing to see the film. His passion on the subject left little room for misunderstanding. Lee was deeply offended by the way the film approached such a painful part of history. When asked about the criticism at the European premiere of Django Unchained, Tarantino brushed it off, saying he wouldn't waste time responding. It was classic Tarantino, brief, defiant, and unapologetic. Interestingly, Jamie Foxx, who starred in the film, later ran into Spike Lee at the BET Awards and brought up the controversy. Foxx recalled that Lee told him he wouldn't say anything bad about the film and that it looked like they were getting it. It was a surprising shift in tone from Lee's earlier stance. But one mystery still lingers to this day. Did Spike Lee ever actually watch Django Unchained? As of now, no one really knows.